Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Beebe Book Buzz. We're back after our summer, and today we're going to help keep summer reading going on just a little bit longer with our selection of books. I have here with me Erin Dagenet and Jackie Powers, and I'm Karen Stern. And yeah, we have summertime books in a way, or maybe ones that you might have wanted to read on the beach, and we just thought, we'd extend the summer a little bit longer since nobody really wants fall to start quite yet. I think maybe we'll start with Erin.
Oh, okay. Ooh. Surprise. We didn't know ahead of time.
They were all waiting with bated breath. They didn't know who was going to go first.
This month I'm talking about Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. This is her 9th novel. It came out in August. There are no copies to be had at the library right now. But get yourself on the list because it's a great book. It's what I would call COVID fiction, if we're calling things COVID fiction at this point.
This has a COVID
does
as
it?
Well, yeah.
This book is very reminiscent of the first summer of COVID, when many people with adult children had their adult children move home to live with them. Karen, that might seem a little familiar for you. So Tom Lake is a book set during the first summer of the pandemic in 2020. And it's set on a cherry farm in northern Michigan. Laura and Joe own the farm, and their 3 daughters, all of whom are in their 20s, have moved home for the summer. Well, they don't know for how long, but they're home for the summer at least. And because it's the pandemic, the seasonal workers who would usually come to harvest the cherries on the farm are not available. So this family has found itself picking cherries all day in the summer. And as they harvest the cherries, the 3 daughters implore their mother to tell them the story of her romance with the famous movie star. They've heard parts of the story throughout their lives, but now that they're older, they're ready for more, sort of like the dirty details. Laura abides and tells the story chronologically through flashbacks in bits and pieces, and we go back and forth through time between 2020, when they're harvesting the cherries, and the summer of 1984. In high school, for a little backstory on Laura, she had played the role of Emily in Thornton Wilder's play Our Town. And her performance was very good. So good that she was scouted by a Hollywood type who came and saw her performance and asked her to travel to California to do some screen testing for a film. She went back and forth doing the testing, got the part, moved to LA to be a star in this movie, and the movie just was delayed and delayed. The project was delayed, and ultimately she moved back to the East Coast, where she then auditioned to play Emily from Our Town on Broadway, and did not get that part, but was invited to go perform Emily from Our Town again. This theme of this book is following us everywhere in this book, in a summer stock in Michigan at a place called Tom Lake, a summer stock called Tom Lake. She went and played Emily opposite a charismatic and gorgeous actor named Peter Duke, who was a nobody at the time, but went on to become the most famous actor of his time, which I like to think of him, in my mind, as George Clooney. I've also heard him,
it too?
George Clooney. I've also heard somebody say Brad Pitt, but I feel like that's not right for me.
It's not the vibe.
Yeah. So Laura's 3 daughters are Emily, Maisie, and Nell, and they love hearing about Peter Duke. There was a time in Emily's life when she was 14 where she was absolutely convinced that Peter Duke was her father. Even though there were no details that really supported that, she just had this really strong feeling. And none of her children seemed to understand why her mother would have had this torrid love affair with this amazing movie star, and yet ended up with their father.
And on the cherry farm.
On the cherry farm in the middle of kind of nowhere. And they pressed her on this. They keep coming back to this idea, even though none of them would exist if that, had happened. And you almost get a sense from the children that they have this regret on the part of their mother, even though the mother has absolutely no regrets about how her life turned out. She's happy. She's happily married. She's deeply in love with her husband, Joe. And through the story she tells to her daughters during the harvest, they come to, we, the reader, learn about the history of her relationship with Joe, how their relationship developed, and how their love grew to be so deep. And Laura's daughters, for the first time, I think, feel that they're getting the whole picture of their mom and have a deeper sympathy for her along the way. So one of the themes of the book is how to honor one of the interesting parts of the book, too, is how as an adult, you sort of have this idea of your parents,
for sure.
that they almost didn't exist before you existed, and their lives weren't interesting, like you are the most interesting thing in their lives. And also that you think you know everything about your parents. And of course you don't, because no one shares everything with everyone all the time. And likewise in this story, even though Laura's, revealing herself to her daughters, there are parts of her story that she does keep to herself that are private, even that she hasn't told Joe. So one of the themes of the book is the wisdom that comes with age. And Laura's describing the sort of passionate love and free spirit of herself in her 20s as this woman, juxtaposed with the sort of patient, predictable, quiet love that she has in her 50s with her husband, Joe. And her kids don't really understand that because they are in their 20s. And so they're relating so deeply with the 20-year-old mother that they can imagine and sort of is very visceral to them. And I get the feeling that the message Ann Patchett is sending is that when we're young, we're looking ahead to all of the things we want, but when we're old, we look around us at what we have. And Laura is very much in that experience of being in that contentment with what she has as opposed to always looking forward, which is sort of that turmoil her daughters find themselves in during the course of the book. So why so much Our Town? Our Town is almost a touchstone in the book. It appears and reappears, and it's often described as one of the greatest American plays of ever written, really. It's about love, life, and death. It's set in the early 20th century in a fictional town called Grover's Corners, New Hampshire. And it's a glimpse into small town life, and that's really all it is. And that's what Tom Lake is too. It's just this, a glimpse into the life, and we get the sense in the 1980s when these actors are living their absolute best days. Their days are spent lounging by the lake, swimming, playing tennis, having tons of sex, and then rolling up to the stage at night just in time to put on the show of their lives and just to wake up the next day and do it all over again. And we see it at the Cherry Orchard as well. I'm just going to pull up my page. We see it at the Cherry Orchard where the family's getting up, they're doing bone-breaking work of picking all day, exhausting themselves, falling into bed at 7 o'clock at night. They wake up the next day and they just do it all again. And at the end of Our Town, the stage director says that what most people live and never see without recognizing sort of the beauty and simplicity of their everyday life. And that is exactly what Laura is doing in this book, is she's just simply observing how her life has been. There's also a nod in the book to Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard, which is very obvious just in the setting of it being at a cherry orchard. But later in the book, the daughters discuss how the changing climate might one day affect their family farming industry and that of their neighbors. They're all abut each other, and it's apples and cherries and pears. And the farming aspect of the book is really well researched and really well executed, really good detail. And so is the theater aspect of the summer stock storyline. The process of auditioning and the roles of the director and the actor. This is a gentle read about a loving family, the power of memories, the reverie of youth, and I would say in this book there's a huge sense of place, both storylines. Again, the Cherry Orchard and Tom Lake both immediately come to life on the page. And they don't seem like fictional places because you've been there. You've been apple picking. You've been, to a lake in the summer, and you can really picture yourself there. If you like Ann Patchett, you'll love this book without a doubt. If you like Elizabeth Strout, you'll love this book, especially I think the Lucy Barton series. They're both they have a very similar writing style. It's nostalgic, some bittersweet, very strong sense of characters, and I highly recommend this book.
Yeah,
I love
anybody.
Really excited to read that.
Yeah,
it's definitely next on my
that's
list.
that's my post-summer read.
Yeah.
Anne Patchett's Tom.
I loved it so much. I almost talked it today too.
Okay, well, it's
because coordinating is important. It was. I was just saying. I thought that was my probably second favorite of hers after The Dutch House.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Really beautiful and really good sense of place.
Really,
both
yeah.
places. I wanted to move to a cherry farm in Michigan.
Right.
I don't like cherries. But
I love books like that have those layers of referencing like other literature. I just read Demon Copperhead, which is obviously references Dickens and David Copperfield. And I love just as you're reading, I mean, even if I can't remember everything about David Copperfield, it's like I love as you're reading, you're just like thinking, oh yeah, there's that and all these parallels that come up.
Yeah.
It just gives that extra depth to the book.
I went out and bought Our Town after
Yeah.
reading this because I want to just do a sort of side-by-side read. And,
I believe Wakefield's first community read that they ever did was Our Town.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Which I think was like
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes
before
a lot
us.
of sense. Yes, it was.
But not that much, like 18 years ago maybe.
Oh, okay.
So a while-ish.
Yeah. All right, Jackie, what you got? Something darker, I think.
Yeah, but still. So this is called Bad Summer People. And I know summer obviously is over, but really clocked out at the end of its shift, huh? But I could not share this. This is like the beach read to end all beach reads. It's like a cross between New York's Page 6, like the gossip column, and like an episode of Dateline.
I have to read this book.
Wow.
It is just like deliciously scandalous and a really kind of inside peek at how the wealthy spend their summers while we're still working.
Well, it sounds like White Lotus to me.
It's very reminiscent of the White Lotus in Italy.
Right.
Not as much the other one, but the Italy one,
Okay.
yes. So it's all about characters and setting, but which for me is like everything. That's what I read for. But there's plenty of plot if that's your jam too. There's something for you. It's set in the fictional town of Salcombe, which is apparently based on a real town called Saltaire, which is on Fire Island, and it's actually where the author summered. So she kind of had it. It's not apparently. It's inspired by people there. I think there was a little bit of an uproar when she wrote it.
Names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Names have been changed, yeah. So I didn't know a lot about Fire Island, but there are apparently a lot of little towns.
Little communities.
Little kind of very insular communities.
Enclaves.
Enclaves, yes. And so the cast of characters is mostly very wealthy New Yorkers,
Right.
Who inherited their beachfront cottages or have the means to construct these big, flashy new ones. So some of the families have been going there for generations, and some of them are newcomers, so everybody's but basically everyone has kind of a lot of money. And they're there to work on their tans and drink a lot of cocktails and play tennis. And the kids are at day camp or with the nanny that they brought from Manhattan. The husbands kind of sometimes will work from home, doing whatever it is they do to make all their money. And there's no cars on the island, or on the, at least I don't know if that's true broadly, but in this particular town.
In Fire Island, I think it's all across.
Is it all? Yeah. So there's boardwalks, and everybody rides their bikes. You know, everybody's got a basket. You know, the kids are a little bit more free range than they would be other places, but it's all fun and games until, no spoiler here, it's on like the first page, a body is found on the board just off the boardwalk. And whether it was an accident, whether it was something more nefarious, is kind of unclear. And you don't know who it is until now the clock starts, like goes back, and the summer sort of unfolds. So the chapters are just like juicy. It's like you're just, what are these people getting up to? And they alternate viewpoints, so you do get to see people. You know, you have the one person's. They're not first person, but like, you know, you have one person's perspective, and then you have like their wife talking. Okay. You're like, oh, okay, it's different. And at first, it feels like there's kind of a lot of people to keep track of, but then the same names keep popping up, and you realize that this is a really insular community where everybody is just like, it's claustrophobically small, and everyone's on top of each other. And in each other's business. And so, of course, there's all these cliques.
Right.
But the Lauren Parker is the kind of undisputed like ice queen of the town, and she's followed closely by Jen Weinstein, and their husbands. They're kind of the main four people. Their husbands, Jason and Sam, have been coming to the island for years, and Jason used to come as Sam's guest. They were best friends growing up. They're still best friends on the surface. But Sam's family had a lot of money, so it had always been coming. And so Jason didn't, and kind of has always lived in his shadow. Sam's like attractive and successful, and like he's always kind of the one feeling like he's tagging along. So he built his own house or bought a house there. So they're kind of new people. But then there's all these peripheral characters that are fantastic. There's Rachel. She's like the lone singleton, but not for lack of trying. And she's the town gossip, so like you can't let her know anything because she tells everybody. There's this Susan who's like the kind of the matriarch, sort of. She's basically a curmudgeon-y widow, and she runs the tennis tournament, which is like the big end of season thing. She got the last tennis pro fired, so now they have a new tennis
got
pro.
a lot of power,
and he's really good looking, and he's kind of down on his luck, and so he's looking for a new opportunity. There's the bartender who's like a 20-something who's been coming there forever with his parents, and he knows everything and he hears everything. It's like, it's just the characters are so readable and they're so terrible. Like they're just like the secondary characters, aside from actually Micah. He's probably the only one who's like not a terrible human being, but most of them are. Even the secondary characters are really like well fleshed out, and they're awful. They're all just awful.
She says with a smile.
It's great though. It's a super fast read because it's just page after page of these people making terrible decisions, and you just can't put it down.
A train wreck.
There's nothing worse than, or nothing more entertaining rather than like rich people behaving badly, and it's that. And I don't want to get into the plot at all because I do think people need to. Like, it's way more fun if you don't know what they're going to get up to.
Yeah.
But it's just, like, everything they could... the people's children are just, like, so peripheral. You forget that they have them half the time.
Right.
Like, everyone is just drinking and playing tennis and, like, sleeping with everybody else. And it's great.
Sounds like I want this to end up being a series. Like, do you think there will be more?
No, it's very...
one and done.
I mean, I guess you could almost do the setting as a series, like a new
group of people, like White Lotus.
Like White Lotus. You could definitely do it like that.
A new setting, but same theme.
Vibe.
Same kind of. You definitely could. This one sort of, there's like a kind of the 6 months later. Like they don't say it like that, but it's
wrapped up.
Kind of wrapped up.
Yeah.
So I think if you liked Lucy Foley's The Guest List, I think there's parallels there. I think that's told from a bunch of perspectives, and it's one of those where you kind of don't know what's going to happen till like the last page. And this one's fairly similar. Like it's right at the end you find out what's going on. Also, if you liked Jenny Jackson's Pineapple Street,
I was going to ask.
Yeah, it's not the same feeling. That one's not gossipy. Like this one is kind of like gossipy and scandalous. That one's not, but it's that sort of like behind the curtain of how the wealthy live, and so. If depending on what you enjoyed about that, you might enjoy this too. But I mean, it is an absolute beach read, like no question.
Yeah.
So I strongly that was Bad Summer People by Emma Rosenblum. This is her first novel.
Okay, knocked it out of the park.
There are also like Tom Lake. There are no copies to be had. So,
right.
Sorry.
There are a few copies to be had of this one, but it's been around a little bit longer than those two, I think. Not much, but. This is exactly what it says on the box. I can't see it because of the label, but it's a romantic comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. You might remember her. She wrote Rodham. She wrote Prep. She wrote. There was the one that was based on a Jane Austen novel, which I can't think of the name.
I liked that one.
That was that was a good one, and that was also a romance of a different kind. But so she's done quite a bit. And this is a romantic comedy in the sense of like a great kind of rom-com movie. It's you almost feel like it was made you could make it into a TV show very easily or a series or something. it's kind of sweet and funny, like, and it follows that happily ever after formula that you want a romance to follow. But because it's Curtis Sittenfeld, it's kind of got a little more bite to it. You know, it's like a little kind of a thinking person's rom-com, maybe. Like, you know, they all have their motivations are maybe analyzed a little bit deeper than, and there's maybe a little bit more of a feminist bent to it. Although I wouldn't overplay that or overstate that. And her humor is definitely doesn't pull punches. It's, you know, it's gets right in there. So. And it's also got this interesting twist to it, which is, and it's kind of timely in the light of the writer's strike that just ended this week, that it's all set against the backdrop of a show that is, it's a late night comedy show. It's in the writer's room of a weekly late night comedy show that's from New York. That's very clearly, you know, Saturday Night Live, not really in disguise at all. And so to back up a little bit, the main character is Sally Mills, and she's a well-ensconced writer on this team. And in the very first scenes, she meets Noah Brewster, who is the musician guest on the show. And so he's going to be there all week prepping for that week's show. And that, in true rom-com style, she immediately dismisses him as a pretty boy and thinks, you know, he's just a bit of fluff and doesn't think anything of it. Meanwhile, she's writing sketches. She has a little bit of a hang-up that's going on in her head right now. She's writing like a sketch about the fact that, so her best male author friend on the team has just gotten engaged to this really, you know, beautiful, kind of sexy celebrity woman, young, beautiful woman, right? And he's this kind of funny and smart, but kind of schlubby guy, right? And
Pete Davidson, Ariana Grande to me.
Right. Yes. No. Exactly. I think she actually references that. I think she does. Yeah.
That's what I was seeing.
And so it's this kind of schlubby but funny guy, you know, with the wildly attractive famous woman, which happens all the time. But she's kind of tweaked because she feels like it would never happen to her because she's the smart, funny woman. She doesn't see herself as wildly attractive. We never really know how how she looks, but she believes that it would never happen to her in the reverse situation. That girl doesn't end up with the hot guy, right? So there's the setup. And because it's this rom-com, you can kind of be assured that all of these things will work themselves out eventually. But the question with rom-coms is always, how is it going to happen? And so this one, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but she breaks the book into 3 parts. And the first part is kind of fun because it gets really deep into the SNL backstory and kind of gives you, you know, the workings of what it means to write a sketch, and then have the competition between everybody about whose sketch is going to get on that Saturday night. And then if your sketch does get chosen, and then along the way, there's all these stories about the different characters backstage and, you know, her friends. And so you're getting some character build up there. And then the second part of the story, COVID hits. So this is where the COVID part comes in. COVID hits, and suddenly Sally is back in the Midwest. You know, SNL is shut. Sorry, it's not SNL. I shouldn't say that. They call it American something.
Up all night or something. I forget.
Yeah, I don't know.
Out all night.
She's back in the Midwest living with her stepfather and his dog. And I think she's kind of vaguely working from home a little bit, but, you know, again, it's that summer, the first summer of COVID, and nobody knows what's going on. And now, again, not to get into their story too much, but they, after a time when they didn't communicate, they strike up an email and chat conversation. So that second part of the book is those conversations where you can see the relationship start to grow. And then the third part of the book is when she takes the leap and decides to go see him. Again, still in lockdown, but she gets to go be in lockdown with him in his glorious mansion in, I don't know, Hollywood Hills or somewhere like that. So those are the kind of parts of the book, and this is how we work our way through the story. And along the way, there's some, as I said, great secondary characters as well. Her friends, 2 girlfriends who are actresses, comedians in in New York, and her stepfather and the dog, there's a sweet relationship there, and it comes back, is important in the last part of the book as well. So, you know, there's those threads. And meanwhile, she's working through all of her, I mean, essentially, because it's a rom-com, you're really mostly focused on her and him. That's how they go, right? And so Sally is very well drawn with all her humor and her neuroses, and she's kind of trying to work through those and find her way into this relationship. And the one criticism I probably have is that he was a little too perfect. You know, he's what you want every rom-com hero to be, in a way. He's good looking, he sings beautifully. You know, he might make a mistake or two, but he always makes up for them in just the perfect way. Or, as you were saying, a lot of his mistakes are in the past, and you can see that he's learned from them beautifully already.
He's sober now, and like,
so he. But anyway, it's you know, it's what you want. It's what you're looking for when you read a book like this. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was actually a book I read on the beach, and I would recommend it along with.
The SNL part was really, really interesting. I felt like if she doesn't, she must have. I don't know how she.
I was reading in the acknowledgments at the end to try to find out, like, you know, who she. And I believe there was. Yeah, it's very detailed, and it does give you a real sense of the grind of it. Like, it's
how the
so
week
hard.
plays out.
I was exhausted just reading.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, okay, so Tuesday you basically stay up all night, and then you sleep for a few hours, and then you come back Wednesday at noon, and then you're in like this 8-hour meeting.
You pitch, you're pitching
So, like,
things.
You don't know until the last minute if you're
Yeah, I mean, things get cut that between, like, from the dress, like the live rehearsal to the the live show. I mean, I can't even.
What would happen if your sketches got accepted every week? I mean, what would you do? Like, you'd just be a wreck.
That was my entry point into this book because I love SNL so much.
Right.
So when I read about it, I just felt so SNL-y to me.
Yeah. Okay, so we've all three read this one too.
Yeah, I've read all the books. Like, that's never happened that I've read all the books.
Well, there you go. Summer reads all. Okay, so I guess that's all we have for you today. We will be back next month, as always, and we hope to see you here on Book Buzz, where you can, Beebe Book Buzz, I should say, where you can find your next great read. Thanks.